Hello, it's Reija and it's time to do my September reading wrap-up. First things first, I read this horrible garbage pile, which I am not going to talk about in this video because I made a separate wrap-up of my Translate-a-thon read. So if you want to know my full thoughts on this, go check out that video. Now on to the better books that I read. First up, I read some Finnish middle grade. I read Revonpuro, and this was a pretty solid read. It's not the best. There are some continuity errors, some kind of timey-wimey things that happen in the book, but it was magical and fun, and I liked that it had an assertive main character. So the book tells the story of a young girl called Owl who lives in the forest with her blind mother, and it's basically about her finding friends and fighting against a tyrannous duke that's governing the lands. And there are witches and magical elements, and it was pretty fun. I read it in like a day, and it was a fun middle grade read, though I have to say that it reads like it was meant for a very, very young audience, like maybe fresh elementary school recruits or something. But it was still pretty good. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I sort of kind of buddy read this with Anita from Anita Reads. We both kind of read this so fast, like in a single day, that it didn't so much feel like a buddy read, though we did discuss our thoughts on the book. I really enjoyed it. I found that it was super relatable. I could definitely relate to the family dynamic that was presented in the book, because that's something that I've grown up with. And I felt a really emotional connection with the book. And I liked the format. It is told in verse. And I actually first read the physical book and then went ahead and got the audiobook and listened to the audiobook as well, like back to back with the physical one. And I would recommend the audio version, because in that way you really get to hear the flow of the verses and the poetry, and I found it really enjoyable. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Red Magician by Lisa Goldstein, and I read this for the Lady Vaults book club, which was created by Elizabeth from Books and Pieces. And in that club we basically read books by forgotten women in the SFF realm. And the first one of those was The Red Magician, and I really enjoyed it. Anyone who knows my tastes knows that I am a sucker for religious themes and theological themes in books. And this was kind of like a dark modern fairy tale set in the World War II era, and we are following the life of this young girl called Kitchi in this sleepy little village in Hungary. And there is this backdrop of the impending doom of World War II and the Nazi invasion and Holocaust. And we kind of get to see this everyday life of these villagers and the peacefulness and this kind of idyll and this kind of idyll that they are living in. And that is all disrupted by this strange man called Voros, who comes into the village to warn them of this impending doom. And you as a reader know what the doom is, and you kind of want everyone to escape. And it's all about this kind of power conflict between the rabbi of the village and Verse, who is trying to help, and Kitchi wanting to see the world and wanting to learn about magic and whether she has magic. And I really liked it. It was really kind of simple and fairy tale-esque, and those were the qualities that I really liked about it. And I liked the themes. I did feel that the ending, like the second half of the book, felt a little bit rushed and not as smooth and well executed as the first part. But I still really enjoyed the story, and I gave the book 3 stars. And then for the BookTube Discord servers book club, the September pick was Temeraire by Naomi Novik, or His Majesty's Dragon. And I loved this book. First of all, alternative historical fantasy. Napoleonic Wars with dragons. It was so much fun to be reading about this historical period that I am quite familiar with, and see how all these different historical events would differ if there were dragons, like tamed dragons in the military. And I love this. I love the characters. They were so full of life. They had different personalities. And basically, if you are into very character-driven narratives and different character dynamics, I think you would love this. If you are not into a very military and battle-heavy content, I think that might dissuade you from reading this book. Because while it has a very character-driven narrative, there are also lots of various battle scenes and lots of kind of military jargon in it. So that might kind of push you away from it. But I just felt that this was such a magical and hopeful story about this lifelong bond and friendship between Lawrence and Temeraire, that I just felt that made up for all the qualms I might have had with the book otherwise. It is a little unevenly paced. It is basically set into 3 parts. First is the birth and the imprinting of Temeraire into Lawrence. Then there is the second part, which is basically a training montage, and then the conclusion is the third part. And I will say that it is a very slow starter, and the ending feels a bit rushed. So it is a bit unevenly paced, but I just loved the characters. So I gave Temeraire by Naomi Novik 4 stars, and I am planning on continuing to read the series. And the final book that I read in September was The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. This is the first book in the Prydain Chronicles, and I buddy read this with Kelsey from the Fancy Hat Lady Reads. And I have to say that neither Kelsey nor I were very impressed with this first book. A lot happens in this. This is very action-packed. There is a lot of things happening in it. There are a whole slew of different kinds of characters, and those are the problems with it. This is a very short book, and there is so much crammed into it that not a lot of those things get a lot of development. There is also a lot of magical coincidences and kind of happy accidents that lead the characters getting exactly what they want. So it's not a very complex narrative. But I still had some fun with it, and I did read the whole thing, and I'm optimistic about the follow-ups, and I'm thinking that with a lot of the lore and characters established in this first one, I should think that the second book will start actually developing these things. But that said, I gave this book 2.5 stars because it didn't quite manage to live up to my expectations. And there you have it. This has been my September wrap-up. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. And tell me in the comments if you have read any of these books. What did you think about them? Did you have a good reading month in September? And if you just want to say hi, please consider leaving me an emoji in the comments. I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!